You can't escape it, right? AI transformation. It's the biggest buzzword in every single boardroom. But here's the really uncomfortable truth. Most of these super expensive, high-stakes projects are failing hard. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why that is and what the anatomy of that failure really looks like. So what you're about to hear is part one of our breakdown of a big research report from Virtualization Options LLC. Today, we're going to diagnose the problem. We are unpacking the anatomy of failure. Then, in part two, we'll get into how to actually prevent it. Okay, so when I say most projects fail, what number comes to mind? Well, get ready for this one. According to a 2024 Rand Corporation study, this is the number, 80%. That is a staggering 4 out of every 5 AI projects, they just do not deliver what they promised. And if you think that number is bad on its own, wait till you see it in context. The failure rate for your traditional IT project is already pretty high, 40%. But AI projects, they fail at literally double that rate. This isn't just business as usual, folks. Something is fundamentally different and a whole lot harder about getting AI right. So let's start with that, the sobering reality. The first major hurdle is just this massive gap between what leadership expects AI to do and what's actually happening on the ground. You see, this gap is fueled by a few core myths. First up is the silver bullet myth. The idea that AI is some kind of magical dust you can just sprinkle on any business problem. Then you've got the pilot to scale chasm. A project might look fantastic in a small controlled test, but then it completely falls apart when you try to roll it out across the entire company. And the result? It's a totally predictable cycle. The initial hype turns into disillusionment, and that skepticism just stalls all the momentum. Now this is where it gets really interesting. Look at the disconnect here. A massive 84% of leaders believe AI is going to be a total game changer for them. But then you ask them, okay, is your company actually ready for it? And that number just plummets to 14%. See, believing in the magic is the easy part. Preparing for the reality is hard. And it seems like most organizations are just skipping that step. And that disconnect leads us right into our next major point of failure, a totally flawed foundational strategy. A lot of these AI projects are doomed before a single line of code is ever even written. You want to know the number one reason these projects are dead on arrival? It's this right here. They start with these vague aspirations instead of concrete goals. An initiative to leverage AI is what I call innovation theater. It sounds great, but it means absolutely nothing. A successful project starts with a goal like reduce our customer response times by 40%. You see the difference? One's a wish, the other is a target. Another huge mistake is something called the silo effect. This is what happens when AI gets treated as just another IT project. The tech team might go off and build a totally brilliant tool, but because they built it in a vacuum, it doesn't solve a real business problem or fit into how people actually do their jobs. The key takeaway here is simple. Technology without integration is just really expensive, unused software. And of course, we have to talk about data. This quote says it all, really. You can have the best AI model on the planet, but if your data is a complete mess, your results will be too. And companies just vastly underestimate this challenge. Get this, data scientists report spending 60 to 80% of their time, most of their job, just cleaning and preparing data before they can even start the real work. And finally, under strategy, there's the big bang fallacy, this temptation to just transform everything overnight. And this approach, it almost always backfires. It completely overwhelms your teams, it magnifies every possible risk, and it ignores the fact that AI requires learning and adapting as you go. A much smarter way to do it is to start small, prove the value, and then scale up gradually. Okay, so we've talked strategy, but that leads us to maybe the biggest, most critical piece of the puzzle, and the one that's so often ignored, the human element. This is often the hardest part to get right. So, check this out. You go ask leaders, hey, are you getting your employees involved in these massive changes? And nearly 3/4 of them say yes, absolutely. From their perspective up in the boardroom, they believe they're communicating and engaging their teams. But, and this is a huge but, when you go ask the employees themselves, the number gets cut almost in half. Only 42% feel like they're actually involved. This massive gap in perception, that's where resistance is born. When people feel like a change is being done to them instead of with them, they're going to reject it. It's just human nature. And compounding this is a serious capability gap at the top. That CEO optimism we saw earlier, it doesn't mean they can actually execute. A stunning 61% of leadership teams simply don't have the skills, things like change management or tech fluency, to actually guide an AI transformation. They're basically trying to fly a spaceship with a driver's license. So with all of that going on, is it any surprise that you get resistance from employees? People are genuinely afraid of losing their jobs. They get frustrated when new, clunky tools disrupt the way they've always worked, and they feel left out of a process that directly impacts their day-to-day life. These aren't irrational fears, right? They're totally legitimate concerns that have to be addressed, not just dismissed. All right, so let's say by some miracle you get the strategy right and you get the people on board. You can still crash and burn right at the finish line. Let's talk about fatal execution failures. These are the ones that happen during and after implementation. This is what's known as the adoption crisis. The AI tool is built, it's technically functional, but nobody uses it. If the tool isn't seamlessly woven into the daily workflow, if it doesn't make an employee's job tangibly easier, it just becomes an optional extra. And when people are busy, you know what happens to optional extras. They get skipped every single time. And that crisis leads to the sneakiest, most dangerous kind of failure of all, the silent one. It starts with a big launch party, right? Everyone celebrates. But then quietly, usage starts to drop. Employees start creating their own workarounds. So the system is technically working, but it's providing zero actual business value. And the failure isn't discovered until months later, when all the momentum is gone and it's just too late. Okay, so let's zoom out and put all these pieces together. What does the complete anatomy of a typical AI transformation failure actually look like? Well, it's rarely just one thing. See, it's almost never one single cause. It's a domino effect. A vague strategy from the top creates a siloed IT project. That silo completely ignores the people, which creates cultural resistance. And bad data and an overambitious scope mean the tool doesn't work well anyway. And because no one is measuring the right outcomes, nobody realizes it's all failing until it's way too late. Each failure point just triggers the next one, creating a perfect storm. Which leaves us with a pretty heavy question, doesn't it? With an 80% failure rate and all these challenges stacked against you, is successfully transforming an organization with AI even possible? The answer, thankfully, is yes. But it requires a radically different approach, and that is exactly what we are going to break down in part 2.